The sterile white of the hospital room had become a familiar, dreaded landscape. Hyun Bin sat beside his son's bed, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor a constant, agonizing soundtrack to his despair. Min-jun, his bright, energetic boy, was now a fragile shell, his small chest rising and falling with shallow, labored breaths. The doctors, with their practiced sympathy and carefully chosen words, had offered what they could: comfort, palliative care, and the grim reality that there was nothing more they could do. They had given up. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hyun," Dr. Lee had said, her voice barely a whisper above the hum of the machines. "We've exhausted every option. Min-jun's condition, it's simply too advanced." Hyun Bin remembered the day Min-jun had been diagnosed. The world had tilted on its axis, the vibrant colors of life fading into a monochrome nightmare. He had clung to hope, to the belief that modern medicine could conquer anything. But now, that hope was a flickering candle in a hurricane. He looked at Min-jun, his skin pale and translucent, his eyes closed. He remembered the boy's infectious laughter, his boundless curiosity, the way he would pepper Hyun Bin with endless questions about the world. Now, silence. A heartbreaking, deafening silence. Outside, the hospital gardens bloomed in defiance of the somber atmosphere within. Hyun Bin had noticed an elderly man tending to the flowers, his hands gnarled and weathered, but his touch gentle and sure. He had seen him murmuring to the plants, coaxing life from the soil. He was the gardener, Mr. Park, a quiet, unassuming presence in the hospital grounds. One day, consumed by grief and desperation, Hyun Bin found himself wandering into the garden. He sat on a bench, tears streaming down his face, the beauty around him offering no solace. Mr. Park approached him cautiously, his eyes filled with a profound understanding. "He is not doing well, your son?" Mr. Park asked, his voice soft and raspy. Hyun Bin nodded, unable to speak. The gardener sat beside him, offering a silent companionship. After a long moment, Hyun Bin finally managed to choke out the words, "The doctors, they say there's nothing more they can do." Mr. Park looked at him, his gaze unwavering. "Doctors treat the body," he said slowly. "But sometimes the spirit needs tending too." He paused, then added, Perhaps I can help." Hyun Bin looked at the old man, his face etched with doubt. What could a gardener possibly do when the best doctors in the country had failed? But in that moment, grasping at straws, he was willing to try anything. "How?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "How can you help?" Mr. Park smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "I will build something," he said. "Something that will bring life back into his spirit." And with that, he began to gather materials, his movements deliberate and purposeful, a quiet determination radiating from him. Hyun Bin watched, intrigued and bewildered, as the gardener began to build. Mr. Park worked tirelessly, his aged hands surprisingly strong as he gathered bamboo stalks, smooth river stones, and vibrant flowering plants from the hospital gardens. He chose a spot just outside Min-jun's window, a small patch of earth bathed in sunlight. Hyun Bin watched, a mix of skepticism and desperate hope swirling within him. He didn't understand what Mr. Park was doing, but the gardener's unwavering focus and quiet confidence offered a strange comfort. Days turned into nights. Hyun Bin spent his time alternating between Min-jun's bedside and the small garden outside. He saw Mr. Park weaving the bamboo into an intricate frame, carefully placing the stones to create a small, winding path, and planting the flowers with a tenderness that mirrored a parent caring for a child. He didn't speak much, but his actions were a silent language of hope and healing. Slowly, a structure began to take shape. It wasn't a garden in the traditional sense, but something more. It was a miniature world, a carefully crafted ecosystem designed to stimulate the senses and soothe the soul. There was a tiny waterfall trickling over the stones, the sound of the water a gentle melody. Wind chimes crafted from bamboo swayed in the breeze, creating a delicate, ethereal sound. And the flowers, a riot of colors and scents, attracted butterflies and bees, bringing life and movement to the small space. One afternoon, Mr. Park beckoned Hyun Bin closer. "It is ready," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. It is a garden of dreams. A place where a spirit can find peace and strength. Hyun-bin looked at the miniature world, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. It was a fragile hope, easily extinguished, but it was there nonetheless. He helped Mr. Park carefully move Minjun's bed closer to the window so that his son could see the garden. Minjun was still unconscious, his breathing shallow and labored. Hyun-bin sat beside him, holding his hand, his heart aching with a love that felt both boundless and unbearable. He looked at the garden, then back at his son, and whispered, "Minjuna, look. Mr. Park made something beautiful for you." For a long time, nothing happened. The only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor and the gentle sounds of the garden. Hyun-bin felt his hope begin to dwindle, the familiar despair creeping back into his heart. He closed his eyes, exhaustion weighing him down. Then, he felt a slight pressure on his hand. He opened his eyes and looked at Minjun. His eyes were open, just barely, and he was looking towards the garden. His gaze was unfocused, weak, but he was looking. Hyun-bin gasped, his heart pounding in his chest. "Minjuna, can you see it? Can you see the garden?" Minjun blinked slowly. Then his lips parted in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was the first smile Hyun-bin had seen on his son's face in weeks. Tears streamed down Hyun-bin's face, tears of joy and relief. He squeezed Minjun's hand gently. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, Mr. Park." Mr. Park stood silently in the garden, his face etched with a quiet satisfaction. He knew that the garden wasn't a cure, but it was a catalyst. It was a way to reach Minjun's spirit, to remind him of the beauty and wonder of the world, to give him a reason to fight. Over the next few days, Minjun slowly began to improve. He was still weak, but he was more alert. He would spend hours gazing at the garden, his eyes following the butterflies as they flitted among the flowers, his ears perking up at the sound of the wind chimes. He even started asking questions, his voice weak but clear. "Appa," he whispered one afternoon. "What's that sound?" "That's the water, Minjuna," Hyun-bin replied, his voice choked with emotion. "It's a little waterfall." Minjun smiled again, a stronger smile this time. "It's pretty," he said. The doctors were astounded. They couldn't explain the sudden improvement in Minjun's condition. They ran tests, consulted with specialists, but found no medical reason for the change. They called it a miracle, a spontaneous remission, a statistical anomaly. But Hyun-bin knew that it was more than that. He knew that it was the garden, the love and care that Mr. Park had poured into it, the connection that it had forged with Minjun's spirit. Minjun still had a long way to go, but he was fighting. He was alive. And Hyun-bin knew, with a certainty that defied all logic and reason, that his son would make it. The gardener had built something that caused a miracle, not by altering the physical body, but by nurturing the spirit within. He had reminded them all that hope can bloom even in the most barren of landscapes, and that sometimes the most powerful medicine is the simple act of caring. Dr. Lee, usually a bastion of scientific stoicism, visited Hyun-bin with an almost hesitant demeanor. "Mr. Bin," she began, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it, "we've reviewed Minjun's case extensively. His recovery, it's unprecedented. We can't explain it medically." Hyun-bin nodded, his gaze fixed on Minjun, who was now sitting up in bed, drawing a picture of a butterfly he'd seen in the miniature garden. "I think I know why," he said quietly, not taking his eyes off his son. Dr. Lee followed his gaze to Minjun, then to the garden just outside the window. A flicker of something akin to understanding crossed her face. "Sometimes," she admitted, "the human spirit defies our understanding." She cleared her throat. "We're going to continue to monitor him closely, of course. But you should prepare for him to be discharged soon. He's remarkably stronger." The news felt surreal. Just weeks ago, they were preparing for the worst. Now, they were talking about going home. Hyun-bin felt a surge of gratitude, so profound it brought tears to his eyes again. He turned to Dr. Lee. "Thank you, doctor," he said sincerely, "for everything." The days leading up to Minjun's discharge were filled with a quiet joy. Hyun-bin spent every moment he could with his son, reading him stories, playing games, and simply basking in his presence. Min-jun, though still weak, was regaining his playful spirit. He would point to the garden and ask endless questions about the plants, the insects, and the tiny waterfall. Mr. Park continued to tend to the garden with meticulous care, adding new flowers and tweaking the arrangement of the stones. He seemed to draw strength from Min-jun's recovery, his usually stoic face softened by a gentle smile whenever he saw the boy watching him. One morning, as Hyun-bin was helping Min-jun eat his breakfast, Mr. Park approached. He held out a small, potted plant, a vibrant blue forget-me-not. "For Min-jun," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "To remember the garden." Min-jun's eyes widened.
Wow.
"It's so pretty." "Thank you, Mr. Park." He carefully took the pot and placed it on his bedside table, next to his drawing. "It's a special flower," Mr. Park continued, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "It blooms even in the darkest of places, as long as it has hope." The day Min-jun was discharged felt like a dream. Hyun-bin carefully carried his son out of the hospital, past the nurses who waved goodbye, past the bustling lobby, and into the bright sunshine. As they walked towards the car, Min-jun turned back to look at the hospital, his eyes lingering on the window of his room, where the miniature garden still stood. "Appa," he said, "can we visit Mr. Park again?" "Of course, Min-juna," Hyun-bin replied, squeezing his son's hand. "We'll visit him every day if you want." Back home, Hyun-bin transformed their small balcony into a miniature garden inspired by Mr. Park's creation. He bought the same flowers, the same wind chimes, even a small fountain that trickled water just like the one in the hospital garden. Min-jun spent hours on the balcony, tending to his plants, watching the butterflies, and listening to the gentle sounds of the water. He was still recovering, but his strength was returning day by day. He laughed, he played, he dreamed. He was alive and he was home. One evening, as Hyun-bin tucked Min-jun into bed, his son looked up at him with a serious expression. "Appa," he said, "I want to be a gardener when I grow up." Hyun-bin smiled, his heart overflowing with love. "That's a wonderful idea, Min-juna," he said. "You would be a very good gardener. You have a very special gift." He knew that Min-jun's recovery was a miracle, a testament to the power of hope, love, and the healing touch of nature. And he knew that they would never forget the gardener who had built something that caused it all. The gardener who had reminded them that even in the face of despair, life, like a delicate flower, could still bloom. Hyun-bin watched Min-jun drift off to sleep, the small blue forget-me-not on his bedside table casting a faint, ethereal glow in the dim light. He quietly left the room, a profound sense of gratitude washing over him. He knew he had to thank Mr. Park properly. A simple thank you felt utterly inadequate. The next morning, Hyun-bin prepared a small gift basket filled with gourmet teas, imported fruits, and a handwritten card expressing his heartfelt appreciation. He and Min-jun drove back to the hospital, the little blue forget-me-not nestled safely between them on the back seat. They found Mr. Park tending to a new bed of roses, his brow furrowed in concentration. Min-jun, unable to contain his excitement, rushed towards him. "Mr. Park. Mr. Park. Look, I brought my flower." Mr. Park looked up, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "Min-juna, it's good to see you looking so well." He knelt down, carefully examining the forget-me-not. "You're taking good care of it, I see." Hyun-bin approached, the gift basket in his hands. "Mr. Park," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved my son's life." Mr. Park waved his hand dismissively. "I just planted a garden, Mr. Bin. It was Min-jun's own spirit that brought him back." "But the garden," Hyun-bin insisted, "it gave him hope. It gave him something to focus on, something to live for. It was more than just a garden, Mr. Park. It was a lifeline." He offered the gift basket. "Please, accept this small token of our gratitude." Mr. Park hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly took the basket. "You shouldn't have," he said, but a genuine smile softened his features. He pulled out a ripe, red apple from the basket and offered it to Min-jun. "Here you go, young man. For being such a brave little gardener." Min-jun beamed, accepting the apple with a grateful nod. Hyun Bin spent the next hour talking with Mr. Park, learning about his life, his passion for gardening, and his deep understanding of the healing power of nature. He discovered that Mr. Park had been a gardener for over 40 years, and that he had always believed in the ability of plants to soothe the soul and mend the spirit. As they were leaving, Mr. Park took Hyun Bin aside. "Mr. Bin," he said quietly, "I have something for you." He led him to a secluded corner of the garden, hidden behind a row of tall hedges. There, in a small, sheltered alcove, stood a sapling, a young cherry blossom tree, its delicate branches just beginning to bud. "This is a special tree," Mr. Park explained. "I planted it a long time ago, hoping that one day it would bring joy to someone who needed it. I think that day has come. I want you to take it home with you, Mr. Bin. Plant it in your garden, and watch it bloom every spring. Let it be a reminder of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of life." Hyun Bin was speechless. He looked at the sapling, its slender branches reaching towards the sky, and felt a profound sense of connection. He knew that this was more than just a tree. It was a symbol of everything they had been through and everything they had overcome. "Thank you, Mr. Park," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I will cherish it always." Hyun Bin carefully transported the cherry blossom sapling back to their apartment. He spent the entire afternoon preparing a special place for it in their balcony garden, digging a deep hole, enriching the soil, and carefully planting the tree. Min-jun watched him with fascination, his eyes wide with wonder. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the city, Hyun Bin and Min-jun stood side by side, admiring their new tree. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blossoms, and the gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, creating a soothing melody. "It's beautiful, Appa," Min-jun said, his voice filled with awe. "It's like a dream." Hyun Bin wrapped his arm around his son, pulling him close. "Yes, Min-jun, he said. "It is a dream. And it's a dream that came true, thanks to a very special gardener." The cherry blossom tree flourished in their balcony garden. It grew taller and stronger each year, its branches laden with delicate pink blossoms every spring. Min-jun loved to spend hours beneath its shade, reading books, drawing pictures, and simply enjoying the beauty of nature. As he grew older, Min-jun never forgot his dream of becoming a gardener. He studied horticulture in college, learning about the science and art of cultivating plants. He volunteered at local parks and gardens, honing his skills and gaining experience. After graduation, Min-jun decided to start his own gardening business. He specialized in creating miniature gardens, inspired by the one that had saved his life. He wanted to bring the healing power of nature to others, to create spaces of beauty and tranquility that would soothe the soul and mend the spirit. His business quickly thrived. People from all walks of life sought out his services, wanting him to create miniature gardens in their homes, offices, and hospitals. Min-jun poured his heart and soul into each and every project, carefully selecting the plants, arranging the stones, and creating miniature landscapes that were both beautiful and therapeutic. One day, Min-jun received a call from the hospital where he had been treated as a child. They were planning to renovate their gardens, and they wanted him to design a new miniature garden for the children's ward. Min-jun was overjoyed. He knew that this was his chance to give back to the place that had given him so much. He spent months designing the perfect garden, incorporating elements of nature that were both stimulating and calming. He included a miniature waterfall, a winding path, and a variety of colorful plants that would attract butterflies and birds. When the garden was finally completed, it was even more beautiful than he had imagined. The children in the ward were delighted. They spent hours playing in the garden, exploring its hidden corners and marveling at its beauty. One afternoon, as Min-jun was visiting the garden, he saw an elderly man sitting on a bench, watching the children play. He recognized him immediately. It was Mr. Park, the gardener who had saved his life. Min-jun approached him, his heart filled with gratitude. "Mr. Park," he said, "it's so good to see you again." Mr. Park looked up, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "Min-jun, he said, "you've become a fine gardener. I'm so proud of you." Minjun sat down next to him on the bench. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mr. Park," he said. "You taught me the importance of hope, resilience, and the healing power of nature." They sat in silence for a few moments, watching the children play. Then Mr. Park turned to Minjun and said, "You know, Minjuna, I always believed that you were destined for great things. You have a very special gift, a gift that can bring joy and healing to the world." Minjun smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Park," he said. "I'm just trying to make the world a little bit more beautiful, one garden at a time." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Minjun and Mr. Park stood up and walked towards the exit. They paused for a moment, looking back at the children playing in the garden. "It's a miracle, isn't it?" Mr. Park said, his voice filled with wonder. Minjun nodded. "Yes, Mr. Park," he said. "It is a miracle. And it all started with a gardener who built something that caused it." The legacy of the miniature garden continued to live on, inspiring hope and healing in the lives of countless people. And Minjun, the boy who had been given up on by doctors, became a testament to the power of the human spirit, the healing touch of nature, and the enduring magic of a garden. He continued to visit his father often, tending to the cherry blossom tree on the balcony, a constant reminder of their journey and the miracle that had bloomed in their lives. The blue forget-me-not, carefully preserved, remained on his bedside table, a symbol of hope even in the darkest of times. Hyun sat on the balcony, the setting sun painting the Seoul skyline in hues of orange and purple. He ran a hand over the rough bark of the cherry blossom tree, its branches now thick and strong, a testament to the years that had passed. Minjun's garden, a miniature world of vibrant green and delicate blooms, thrived beside him, a living echo of the miracle that had rewritten their lives. He remembered Dr. Lee's solemn face, the sterile scent of the hospital, the crushing weight of despair. "Appa." Minjun's voice, now deep and resonant, broke through his reverie. He turned to see his son standing in the doorway, a gentle smile gracing his lips. "What are you thinking about?" Hyun smiled back, a warmth spreading through his chest. "Just remembering," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Remembering how close we came to losing you." Minjun walked onto the balcony and sat beside his father, their shoulders touching. "I remember too," he said softly. "But I also remember Mr. Park, the garden, and hope." Hyun nodded. Hope. It had been a fragile, flickering flame in the darkness, but Mr. Park had fanned it into a roaring fire. He had shown Hyun that even when science reached its limits, there was still room for faith, for beauty, for the unwavering belief in the power of life. "You've done so much, Minjuna," Hyun said, his voice filled with pride. "Your gardens are bringing joy and healing to so many people." Minjun shrugged, a humble smile playing on his lips. "I'm just giving back what I received," he said. "Mr. Park showed me the way." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below. Hyun reached out and took his son's hand, his fingers intertwining with Minjun's. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for Minjun's survival, but for the man he had become. He had transformed his own suffering into a source of healing for others, a living embodiment of resilience and compassion. A soft breeze rustled through the leaves of the cherry blossom tree, scattering a few petals into the air. Hyun watched as they danced on the wind, delicate and ephemeral, yet imbued with the power of life. He knew that their journey had been long and arduous, filled with pain and uncertainty. But it had also been a journey of love, faith, and ultimately, redemption. He thought of Mr. Park, the quiet, unassuming gardener who had seen something in Minjun that the doctors had missed. He had understood the profound connection between nature and healing, the ability of beauty to soothe the soul and mend the spirit. He had built not just a garden, but a bridge to hope, a pathway to life. Later that evening, after Minjun had left, Hyun found himself drawn to the small, framed forget-me-not that sat on his bedside table. It was faded and brittle, a relic of a time when his world had teetered on the brink of collapse. He picked it up and held it close to his heart, a silent promise to never forget the lessons he had learned. He knew that life was fragile, that loss was inevitable. But he also knew that hope could bloom in the darkest of places, that healing could be found in the most unexpected corners, and that love could conquer even the most insurmountable obstacles. He closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. He was no longer the desperate, broken man who had stood at the precipice of despair. He was a father, a survivor, a believer in the enduring power of the human spirit. And as he drifted off to sleep, he dreamed of gardens, of blossoms, and of a quiet gardener who had built something that caused a miracle. The miracle of life, of love, and of the unwavering hope that bloomed even in the face of death. The legacy of that small garden, and the gardener who tended it, would continue to blossom in Minjun's work, in the lives he touched, and in the enduring love between a father and his son. The blue forget-me-not, a symbol of remembrance, would forever serve as a reminder of the journey, the pain, and the extraordinary miracle that had transformed their lives. Hyun knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his soul, that the garden, and the hope it represented, would continue to flourish for generations to come.